Susan believed that having a retired police dog would be a good thing, especially because she was a woman living in Detroit. However, things didn't go as expected when she went to the ATM and a scary man blocked her. It all happened very quickly, but Susan was surprised by what her dog did. In Detroit, there are always dangerous situations, and Susan had some experiences she wished she could forget. Being a young woman by herself, she was often the target of people with bad intentions on the streets. To make things worse, her boyfriend left her and kicked her out of their home. Unfortunately, she didn't have much money, so she had to move to one of the worst neighborhoods in town. Sometimes in life, you can't change your situation right away, so you have to do your best and endure whatever challenges come your way. It was tough for Susan because, since she moved to that neighborhood, she was robbed twice, and people would often follow and bother her. Once, she was almost taken by someone, but she managed to escape because she had pepper spray with her. In short, Susan felt very unsafe, and she couldn't immediately move to a better neighborhood. However, a surprising solution came her way when she least expected it. One day, Susan decided to go to the local animal shelter. She was feeling a bit lonely, so she wanted to see if she could find a cat to adopt. However, her attention was immediately drawn to another animal. A police officer came through the door with an older-looking German Shepherd. Susan overheard the employee tell her that he was a retired police dog and that the animal needed a new home since no one at the station wanted to care for her. Once Susan heard all this, she thought that the dog could solve both her problems at the same time. She interrupted the police officer, introduced herself, and explained her situation. She begged him to let her adopt the dog, and the police officer had no problem with that. He didn't even seem to care about the story. He just wanted to get rid of the dog. Susan found that to be a little strange, but she was too happy to care. The dog's name was Ranger, and from the first few minutes she walked with her by her side, she felt people looked at her differently. There was no one calling her name or approaching her, and when someone whistled and she stopped walking, they immediately apologized. Susan felt that with Ranger by her side, she had a superpower of some kind. She felt untouchable and safer than she had ever felt since she had moved to that neighborhood. It seemed like things were finally looking up. After they got home, Susan showed Ranger around their new home, but Ranger didn't seem too excited. Ranger's tail was down, and she sniffed everything in the house as if she was searching for something. Some habits are hard to change. At night, Ranger was restless, and Susan could hear her moving around the house, even with her bedroom door closed. In the morning, Ranger was fast asleep on the couch. It was a bit strange, but Susan thought maybe Ranger was used to working at night when she was a police dog, so her schedule was different. Susan wanted Ranger to be active during the day too, so she decided to wait at home until Ranger woke up before going out. Susan was scared to go out alone, even though she had been doing it for the past 2 months. But waiting turned out to be a good idea because she would need Ranger that night. In the afternoon, Ranger was awake and full of energy again. This was perfect timing because Susan had to get money from an ATM nearby, and she always felt unsafe when she had to do that. There was a good reason for her fear. She had been robbed at that ATM before, and she knew that many other people had also been robbed there. It was very easy for the criminals because there were no cameras around, and the police had done nothing about all the reports that had been made about the issue. There was no other ATM in the area though, so Susan and everyone else in the neighborhood didn't have much of a choice but to keep using it. When she and Ranger approached the ATM, there was no one standing in line, just a couple of people around. They were probably waiting for someone to make a withdrawal worth stealing, but Susan felt safe with Ranger by her side, and the dog was on high alert as they approached the ATM, so no one got close to them. As she walked away from the ATM, Susan felt eyes on her and saw that Ranger kept looking back. It was clear someone was following them, but Susan kept walking. She felt safe with Ranger there, but she did hurry back home. When she was approaching her house, 3 men with hoods over their heads walked toward her, and they didn't look friendly at all. Susan froze and drew Ranger close to her. At first, the dog didn't do anything, but as the men got closer, Ranger began to growl and bare her teeth at them. The men quickly crossed the street and walked away. Susan was very relieved, and when they got home, she gave Ranger extra treats. Who knows what would have happened to her if Ranger hadn't been there. This almost made Susan forget her strange behavior from the night before. For the next few nights at Susan's home, Ranger's behavior was basically the same. She was very active at night, and whenever she heard police sirens around, It felt like she was waiting to be picked up. This made Susan a little sad for the dog, but she hoped that Ranger would get used to her new home, as she did her best to make the dog comfortable. One night, it was time to withdraw money again, so Susan headed to the ATM with Ranger in tow. When they got to the ATM, there were two people there. One was withdrawing money, and the other was waiting patiently behind. Susan wasn't interested in standing there and being an easy target, so she decided to take a short walk around the block. When she returned, the ATM was empty, except for a man standing a few feet away from it with his hood over his head. Susan hesitated but decided to go to the ATM. Ranger, her dog, was initially unsure but seemed interested in a man nearby. After Susan withdrew her money, she quickly hid it in her purse. Susan noticed that Ranger was watching the man closely. Suddenly, the man started to approach them, making Susan nervous. Ranger didn't react at first, so Susan called her name. Ranger then began rolling at the man who was acting strangely. Susan decided it was time to leave and pulled Ranger's leash. Ranger obeyed, but the man quickly chased after them. He was fast, and Susan screamed in shock, trying to escape, but the man blocked her path. "Please," she cried out, "I don't have much. Please don't hurt me." She held her purse and Ranger's leash tightly, hoping Ranger would come to her senses and do something to scare the man away. But she didn't. She just growled at the man, but not like before when she scared away the three other men. Meanwhile, the man just stood there. Was he waiting for someone? Susan knew she needed to leave quickly because she didn't want to know what the man was planning. She tried to walk away, but the man followed her, blocking her path and getting closer. Susan stepped back, and when the man stayed where he was, she saw a chance to run. Just as she was about to run, Ranger, her dog, moved towards the man. Susan pulled the leash to stop Ranger, but it didn't help. Ranger whined and tugged, wanting to get closer to the man. Ranger pulled so hard that the leash slipped out of Susan's hand, and she screamed. Susan didn't want her dog to harm the man, just to scare him away so they could go home. Susan was puzzled by Ranger's behavior, but instead of attacking the man, Ranger did something surprising. She ran up to the man and jumped into his arms. The man laughed and easily caught Ranger. Ranger licked the man's face, and his sweatshirt fell down, revealing that he was just an ordinary older man. "That's my dog," the man said, and he put Ranger on the ground and ordered her to lie down. Without hesitation, Ranger immediately lay down on the ground. "I'm Gary," the man finally said. "I used to be a police officer. Ranger was my partner, but I couldn't take her with me because I had a job to do back then." Susan was very surprised. This explained why Ranger was so interested in the man. It turned out that the man had seen Susan and Ranger before and recognized the dog. He didn't want to scare Susan by coming too close, so he stayed hidden. But he wasn't very good at hiding. The man actually just wanted to give Ranger one last hug because he really liked her. They decided to meet for coffee during the daytime to talk, and Susan found out that he didn't have any bad intentions. It went so well that Susan agreed to meet with him 2 or 3 times a week so he could spend time with Ranger. You can imagine how happy Ranger was about that. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.